It's so interesting, just the constraints that the parents' beliefs will hold and set as the foundation for the child for 20, 30 years, or potentially the person's entire life, that if you don't consciously work to undo, that is your worldview. Right, what should we talk about?
Well, you just said what you want to talk about.
What we want to talk about is fanning each other's success as partners.
What do you think about that?
What do I think about that? Well, many different aspects to it. I think one of the things that worked for us was just having a lot of our visions and values aligned pretty much from the very first conversation that we had. And I think one thing that we've spoken about a trillion times is like how shocking it is that people don't find out a lot of the deeper value stuff being misaligned until literally like years down the road, 5 years, 10 years down the road. But I think we took a different approach, and like, what is the mission that we share and what are the values that we hold sacred?
That's like our first date ever.
As literally like our first
Unplanned.
date,
It just kinda happened.
at a tea shop in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And then we're like, wow, like our values and vision and mission are like extremely aligned. Like, maybe we should see each other again.
Maybe we should text.
Maybe we should text.
Maybe we should hang out. Yeah, I mean, I think as I think about it, and I guess I have some friends who are a bit older who are still looking for their partners, and there's always this like question around, should I be with someone that maybe I'm not like 100% compatible with, in the sense of all of my visions and all of my desires and certain way of lifestyle, and maybe my spiritual practice, and just kind of like, but we have a really good sense of affection for one another. Like, should I settle with someone like that, or should we be just like 100% on everything? And to be honest, like, sometimes it's hard for me to say, but I feel like I want that, like sense of almost 100%. Like, I personally couldn't settle with someone that I didn't feel like that. And I have dated people who didn't share my values in the sense of even just like lifestyle. I have like a very specific type of health regimen and lifestyle, when it comes to Ayurveda and yoga, and that I don't drink and that I don't eat meat or fish. And like, even though I don't want to project a judgment on someone who does that, for me, like, I realized it was important that someone shared even something as basic as that with me.
Yeah.
Like just having, and I think what has kept our relationship alive also is just, that we do like have so much shared work.
Yeah.
We work on projects together all the time. And I think that's a traditional kind of family model where it's like the whole family has their business, the whole family has their project, instead of exclusive like worlds.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, to your point, like having a partner who not necessarily has like every single interest has to be 100%, compatible. Like, I think some of our interests don't really overlap with each other.
Yeah, for sure.
Like little microcosms of where our consciousness likes to dwell. But I think the overarching like themes of, self-actualization, healing, lifting up others, creating community, aesthetics.
I think that's something that seemed to me like we had, because I was an artist, I went to art school. I felt like maybe that was a world you didn't enter into so much of mine when we were first together. But
I felt that way about music for you, because music was such a huge part of my life. 15 years as a musician.
Yeah, but then I feel like now it's interesting because I feel like we actually are always talking about like design and aesthetics, and maybe it's not
architecture.
It's not specifically my particular flavor of visual art, but the theme of aesthetics, the theme of like cultivating space in a beautiful way, curating experience, space, vision, design. We do
web pages, ads,
like we share
Instagram profiles, feeds, homes,
interiors. Anyway, sorry, that was a side note.
No, I think what would be helpful for us to talk about is like, how do we create like relationships where we're basically just bringing out the best in each other and seeing each other's visions, and like not necessarily having to, again, have that 100% overlap of we're obsessed with everything that each other's obsessed with in every single way, but we see each other's potential, we fan the spark of each other's potential. Like, how have you appreciated that, or like kind of seen that develop in our relationship, and
Well, I think
what's
it's
worked for
happened
us?
naturally, but now we're readdressing it in a more conscious way of how we can continue to do that as we shift, into parenthood, family, having a business. Like, what structures do we need to put into place that facilitate that for both of us? And I think within a relationship, it's the dance of togetherness and individuation. And I feel like it might be more challenging to support someone in their individuation when you're so used to being in togetherness. But that's something that's coming up, I think, for both of us right now. Is like, okay, how are we gonna look at each other's specific desires? Because, for example, like your desire to build a really big business, it's like I don't share that desire personally. Like, if we weren't together, I probably wouldn't be building a huge business. It's not who I am. But knowing that, for example, like sometimes I think that there's a baseline in terms of how much you desire to work, right? And we're past the point of like, you need to work because it sustains us, but you need to work because it nourishes your aspiration for what you can grow and build in the world.
Yeah.
And for me to continue to see that and just say, hey, like, we can do bigger, we can do better, and just continue to fan that.
Yeah, to not live in a relationship that's like constrained by what we think is possible.
Right, and I think that's the main thing that I'm coming across right now is, and I want to hear more of your thoughts, but like, at least what I'm meditating on now is I think so many of the constraints that particularly families and partners maybe face is more so like expectations around the way things need to be structured, or the way things need to be, that are almost like self-imposed. And reality doesn't actually have to be like that. Like, for example, we just ran into our friend who, has 2 kids, and she's full-time with them as a full-time mom, and she feels like she needs to be with them even though she isn't nourishing her intellectual side, her aspirational side, her vision, kind of the entire realm of her existence outside of her family. And what comes to my mind is like, well, we're making that decision. But you can also choose to structure your reality in a way that isn't self-limited by the fact that like you're the only person who can exclusively be with the kids. Does that make sense? Like, what if you structured your day-to-day life in a way that you did actually just prioritize the 4 hours of self-time that you need to invest in your own well-being and dreams also?
Yeah.
Because that's like, I think across the board, at least the generation before us, it's just like a classic story. It's like, well, my mom had all these big dreams and then she had us, and now she's
raising
60.
your children to the detriment of your own vision and dreams, which of course there's going to be any element of sacrifice, but
which is a virtue.
Why,
also.
like, I guess my question is like, if you had the choice, which I believe we have the choice, like, why put your vision and what you hold most sacred on the altar of what gets sacrificed to, quote unquote, be like a responsible parent? Or
right, at least in my mind, and this is shifting the conversation a bit, but this keeps coming up for me, is like, wouldn't I want to model what I want my child to believe in?
yeah,
If I believe that you can have time to nourish all the values of your life, all the aspects of your life, why wouldn't I be able to model that and structure my time in a way that models that? And I think that what that circles around is making decisions as simple as like having help.
Yeah.
And deciding that it's okay to have help.
Yeah.
So that you can do and invest in more of your own internal world.
Yeah, I think that modeling practice, like for our child, will be really just interesting to see play out. Like, I think I think a lot of people, they kind of set the baseline of like what's reasonable for their life based on their parents' beliefs. Like their parents' beliefs around money kind of sets like a financial standard for what they believe like they quote unquote need. And need is an arbitrary number that's set by what your parents believed around money. And as an example, but I think a lot of people base their entire existence of like what's quote unquote reasonable based on how their parents spoke about vision, how their parents spoke about, the child's like artistic interest and
Right.
endeavors and passions, and like, oh, that's unreasonable, and like I heard that a lot through my childhood. And of course I was supported in so many different ways that I'm super grateful for, but like I wanted to be a musician. I was unreasonable. And then I was like, I wanted to be into biology. And I was like, okay, that's better. That's science. Maybe you'll be a doctor. And I was like, no, I'm not going to be a doctor. I want to like help the planet. And it's like, well, there's no money in that. That's unreasonable. How are you going to, And so like just the constraints that the parents' beliefs will hold and set as the foundation for the child for 20, 30 years, or potentially the person's entire life, that if you don't consciously work to undo, that is your worldview. And so you're just sharing, like, I think at least our personal value is that it is our duty to set by example how to live in our visions and our passions and how to nourish those things. And also, like, we know people in pretty much every realm of passion making tremendous amounts of money, which kind of eliminates the whole like you're not going to make money through your passion thing argument for any area of life. There's a game to being an artist, a successful artist. There's a game to, thinking of ideas that bring value to a marketplace, using who you are as a human and using your natural given talent and passions.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think and this conversation is just quite circuitous, so I think that's natural. It's like the main challenge with that is that there's such a dissonance now between the values of work and purpose, right? Whereas in traditional cultures in the past, that was much more aligned, right? Where your purpose in the world, your actual gifts, like you were a healer, that was maybe your family's lineage, or you were an artisan, and that was naturally the way that you sustained yourself and your family. Whereas now the dissonance between those two things is so vast for so many people, because there's
a large social narrative around what is to be monetized and not monetized. And also like breaking family traditions. Like there's, first of all, not very many family traditions that are intact, whereas it used to be generational, like this is what our family does for the past 500 years.
But we do still know people, like that.
There's some people,
which is
some of our gurus, some of our teachers who have done it for many, many generations of family, and they just get passed down and they become so incredibly expert at it. And it's like, man, they're talented in so many regards that they're set for life. Instead of each generation having to reinvent itself and figure, who am I? What's my contribution to the world? Who are my people? What is my work? How do I earn? It's like so many people, and obviously we've spoken about this so much, like they're spending so much of their time and energy trying to build the container of life, which goes to Richard Rohr's like whole Falling Upward book. Like the first half of life is like building this container. Who am I? What's my contribution? Who are my people? What is my place in the world? How do I earn and sustain? Like that's the container of life. And so many people are trying to just figure out what's that container, or just fixing and repairing it at all times, that they never get to finally pour into that container the actual contents of joy and spiritual satisfaction, self-actualization.
And I think in the context of this conversation, that's like the actualization of their dreams or their visions.
Yeah.
Right. And it seems like, because obviously your main work right now is supporting healers and creative types in relating with wealth, understanding wealth, like it seems to me that the faster you get a grip on how to build that container, the more you can invest in creating the structures and the lifestyle that will facilitate you to really be able to pursue those dreams. What do you think is like the relationship between the generation of personal wealth and the pursuance of one's dreams. Because there is also like the dreams that you pursue through the business that you create, and then also all the other aspects of life that the creation of wealth nourishes.
Can you maybe restate that or just rephrase a little bit?
Well, you're talking about building this container. It seems to me like the main crux of that right now for younger generations is understanding how to create wealth, because for us at least, we're able to right now make these decisions around the way we want to structure our life to pursue our visions and our dreams because we've come to a certain level of stability with our wealth, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's obviously so many answers to this sort of question. One is just like, I think a lot of really great people have really poor beliefs around money. And so it causes them to I guess, underemphasize that component of existence to a fault, where really I think about like, okay, sure, there's the business side, that success side of existence, and then there's all the other parts of satisfaction and interest and whatever. But for me, I've always just approached it like order of operations. Like, if I just focus on this one thing, will it help me unlock all these other components of life? And because money is such a big driver of, not obviously, it can't buy you happiness, but it can buy you options, it can buy down pain, and money is certainly a reason why people don't do a lot of things and don't pursue a lot of things. Think about all the things in your life, for instance, that, you as an audience have not done because of money. And just think about, like, if you never had to think about money being limited again, like, what would existence look like? What would you pursue? And would that not be a really great thing to establish as far as like having a cash flow vehicle, having financial abundance with something that's aligned with your values? Would that not be one of the best assets to establish prior to trying to fulfill everything else in your life?
Right. Yeah, it just reminds me, often in most of our Ayurveda trainings and our personal growth education, you have like your kind of central workshop, which really talks about the 5 values of life, being spirituality, wealth, purpose, health, and relationships. And you always give this example or image of those values being a tree, spirituality being the roots of that tree, right? Health being the soil, and then wealth being the trunk of the tree. I think that's like a really perfect image for exactly what we're talking about, that wealth is, it's like what creates the stability through which all of the roots, the nutrients from the soil and the earth become nourished and then come out as purpose, as the fruits of the tree.
Yeah, it's an integrator. It's an amplifier. All the, just for sake of this example, like all the nutrients from the soil and the water is coming up through the trunk, and all the nutrients from photosynthesis are coming down, in the form of sugars throughout that trunk. And it's just an integrator. Like, wealth is something that without it, a lot of people live disjointed existences where they have to separate, here's my work, and that takes like 80-90% of my life, and then here's like my passions, here's all my other duties and day-to-day responsibilities, and it just creates a disjointed existence, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah. So back to our main topic, because we're talking specifically in relationships.
Yeah, in relationships.
What does that look like for you in terms of finding the spark of one another and finding our dreams?
I think it could be helpful to share like a few pivotal moments. Like, I think, a few pivotal moments that have allowed us to make radical decisions and go all in on what we think is possible as far as our own personal aspirations. Like, The first, obviously, being that key alignment of our mission, vision, values, and that very first conversation that we ever had, and be like, wow, we want the same things in life on a deep level. You know, maybe superficially, there's different interests and different little niches of things that we obsess about, but overall, we share this really beautiful like foundation. And so that's obviously important, but when somebody sees the good in you and they see your potential, they see you in your highest light, and they're fanning that spark, that is the best feeling in the world. And that is what I think has allowed me to make decisions that were really bold, that on my own, I don't know if I would have had the courage to have made. Maybe I would have, but like, for instance, you know, hiring my first coach for a tremendous amount of money. Like, I remember you being in the room and me just sharing like, yeah, I want to hire this coach. I know that I have so much more potential to put out into the world. And
it's more than the amount I have in my savings.
And yeah, what this coach wants to charge is more than my entire life savings. They wanted $27,000, and I think at that time in life I had like $22,000 or $24,000 saved. And that took me like a lot of hard work and like sacrifice to try to just stack that amount. At that time, it was substantial for me. And so I just looked at you and
I was just like, why not?
You're like, yeah, why not? Why not do it? Which for me, like, it's so interesting, like having been in conversations on hundreds of sales calls with people and then having to speak to their partners and things like that. And for me, like, obviously every relationship is unique and I respect that. But I've had certain people whose partners like blew up on them for even thinking about investing substantially in their own selves. And for me, that's kind of heartbreaking because I get it, like practically speaking, there's shared finances, you know, making decisions together, etc. And for me, it's like, well, if you thought your partner could do it, it wouldn't be ridiculous at all. And so it's like holding this belief about what your partner can and cannot do over their head that's dictating how they spend their own money. Like, I've had people who were dissuaded from spending their own money, not even shared money, because of their partner's disbelief in them being able to do it. And for me, that's heartbreaking.
And it's not only disbelief, it's obviously the values that you have and a certain fear around risk, quote risk,
and I get that.
Ties into disbelief, right? Because you'd only think it was a risk if you didn't believe that a certain transformation was possible.
Yeah, it shows where that person is at, you know, in their belief structures and what's possible.
Yeah.
And what they believe their partner can make happen. And for you, like, we had never even fathomed spending that amount on anything. Like, not even anywhere close, like as a couple. And you didn't have any work, so I was pretty much the main financial provider for both of us. And you said, yeah, spend more than the entirety of what you have. Go for it. And I was like, whew, okay. So that ability for, I think, you to believe in me sometimes more than I believed in myself has allowed me to make decisions that I think a lot of people on their own would not have the courage to make. So that's one example for sure. And then I think for you, and maybe you can speak to this like on your end, like just briefly, like you going through this experience of like having these visions for these beautiful artist pilgrimages that you wanted to lead all over the world and show people artisans and the crafts of these different cultures and immerse yourself in the kind of mystic traditions of those different countries and places and traditions. And it was like this thing like brewing inside of you, like, but there was fear, there was hesitation, there was, you know, sometimes like lack of action or just following through. I guess I'm wondering, like, what was your kind of experience like? In what way did relationship kind of help you take that jump and actually lead these really incredible experiences?
Well, something that's coming up for me as we talk about it is I think the idea of a woman being supported financially by a man has become something quite taboo, and it's become something that signifies control. Whereas for me, like as I think about it right now, I think that in our relationship, that has been a huge part of what has actually allowed me to pursue my dreams. It's not like you're like, I support our family, therefore I control you. It's more like you support our family, and that's what gives me the space and facility to invest in what I want without these other pressures.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's like such a turnaround of the narrative.
Yeah, the energy of survival and the energy of creation cannot exist at the same time.
Right, and I think like, you know, I've been having this image in my mind. I remember once we were listening to a podcast, and someone was describing like, you know, and I'm not such a believer in really intense distinction between like masculine and feminine roles or anything like that, but he was speaking about how the traditional male role was like to go out and conquer, you know, to like go out and hunt and conquer. And I remember listening to that and just being like, oh my God, like I don't want to conquer anything. And I was like, wow, what a relief. Like, that's not my job. Like, I don't need to conquer something. But I think like, so the image, this illustration that's been in my mind is kind of like that masculine structure which supports kind of like being the gates of a home, let's say, and within that is like the courtyard where that feminine energy, the creative energy, and the energy of children also like plays. I don't know if that
makes sense.
That's like an image that's making sense, but that...
Yeah, there's a kingdom, the king upholds the walls and the safety and the structure.
And the structure, and then what's within that is like
is the
play,
life, the flowers and the art and
exactly.
the little, what is it called, the powdered, you know, mandalas at the doorsteps.
Yeah, like all the refinements of life, which I think, you know, and again, not to like categorize or put something in a box, but I think that feminine energy of refinement, of creating like beautiful space and aesthetics and growing life, that is what's like alive in the center of the courtyard. And I feel like that's what you providing for us and creating that structure has allowed me to access for myself. Is like, yeah, I don't have to work for survival, but I can invest my energy in my dreams in a creative way that brings more life.
Yeah.
And that has been, you know, through my own personal projects.
Yeah. I think like, you know, maybe you can agree or disagree with this, but I think in relationship to what I was sharing, like around you going off and doing your first big things with your retreats, like I think you needed that slower process where it wasn't
and
like
even still,
you need to earn right now or else like, you know, you're not a contributing member of the family, like you didn't have that sort of pressure on your head. So, which I don't think you thrive under in any way whatsoever, like deadlines and like very like, you know, any sort of heavy expectation like that. And so I think that allowed you to really think like, what is the vision? What is like this really beautiful experience that I want to curate more from a place of vision, desire, than a place of necessity. And
it's allowed that to like brew over time, and even still I feel like
every day
my pace is like more of a turtle and that's okay for me. And I feel like accepting that this is a vision, you know, specifically with these projects like around having the artist pilgrimages and bridging the worlds between arts and mysticism and allowing people to experience that, like this is something that I want to do over my whole life. So having that opportunity to allow it to brew and have space is what allows me to thrive, you know, in my own nature.
All right, we had to take a baby break here, but you know, we've been chatting for a little while. I think we can give maybe just a few like action items, whether that's like for like a romantic partner or just any relationship, like to take inventory of, you know, maybe how is this person gonna help me get to my vision? How do I create more of like that visionary relationship and supportive relationship where we can fan each other's flame and spark and desire and really support each other? So what's like the first thing that comes to mind for people to think about?
I think always the first thing is vision. Obviously, it's a word that we've said a lot, vision, but life can become very maintenance oriented, right? Like if you have a home and you have a family and you have kids and you have all these moving parts and even a business, like everything can just become standard maintenance. Apologies, the baby sounds. And so it's like essential to just continually reconnect to vision, and you can have a vision, that you wrote out a year ago, but you need to be revisiting that every few weeks, I think, really. So getting out of maintenance and into aspiration as a starting point to like drawing out the map, getting clarity on actual desires. Like, what do you want? Do you know what you want? Most people don't know what they want, or they're afraid to say it. They have never had the time or the space or the permission to just name what they really want.
I think something else fun to think about is like a Bucketless Buddy.
Yeah.
Like we went, we had our trip to Miami last week and just kind of spent some time unwinding on the beach, going to nice cafes, but like we spent time just like, it just took us 5-10 minutes to like really sit with what are all the things like from a personal level, health level, spiritual level, travel level, self-development, business development, like level, like that would be like on our bucket list and like our dream list, like big things, small things, whatever they are, just write all of them down. And what are ones that we want to like tackle together? What are ones that we can push each other and remind each other of and be like, hey, remember your list here? Like it can be as simple as that, because like you were saying, it's so easy as humans to be in a default state of just day to day and just maintenance and just
the urgent tasks and not the important but not urgent.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's so many things that like will nourish the heart and unlock greater capacity that even aren't necessarily directly business or success related, but just stepping more into like that is going to nourish the heart and have you live an incredible existence. And when your cup is full, when those contents of your container are overflowing, naturally that creative energy goes into everything that you do. And people want to buy whatever you have. They're like, I'll take whatever she's having because I'll have whatever she's drinking because she looks, radiant, or he looks radiant and inspired and connected and, just...
It's a choice.
Yeah.
Like doing that is a choice.
And that's the only reason people buy anything, is because they believe that whatever the product is that they're buying can help them live a better life. And so if you yourself are a living example of living a better life, which doesn't necessarily have to cost a lot of money, but just doing the things that really inspire and nourish you and have you overflowing, that's a really great place to sell from, interestingly enough as well.
Yeah. I think the first step would be just like getting really clear on what you desire and allowing yourself to get in touch with that and to write that out and have a little date at the coffee shop and just play around with that. And then the next obvious question is like, okay, well, what structures do I need to put in place to be able to do that? Right. Mm-hmm. And so what we talked about was like, okay, how do we structure ahead of time every 6 weeks or every quarter, every season that we have a particular trip planned, whether that's together, whether that's alone.
I think what your spiritual teacher says about time is really special too, like in relation to exactly what you're saying, like time of day, time of week, time of month, time of year, time of life. Like thinking about like, where do these little pockets of dream and vision, how do they fit into the time of day? Like what time of day is for the vision? What time of week, like a sacred window in your week, that's time for that sacred vision. What time of month, like maybe there's a weekend each month or a few days. And then time of year, maybe there's like you're saying, like what we've started to put into place is like at least at the equinoxes and solstice, just because it makes it easy. Like here's 4 times a year where every 12 weeks or so, we get to go do a bucket list thing and go have a really nourishing trip. And we've just set that in place. And just like, we're really excited about that because we have been historically bad at taking trips purely to fill our own cups. We've taken a lot of trips to facilitate others, lead retreats, trainings, teach, etc., and like be a part of other people's seminars and masterminds and whatever. But to just pre-decide, like, this is sacred. Nothing touches this. Because it is the thing that will go to the back burner by default over and over and over and over and over. At least that's, been my general experience, unless I've like forcefully inserted, here's a time of day, here's a time of week, here's a time of month, here's a time of year.
Yeah.
So I think that's important too, because that's just nature of time. Like, people fight with time.
And then just do it.
And just do it. Look at kayak, book the ticket.
Yeah, and also, like, it doesn't even have to be something that is, there can be bucket list items that aren't like swimming with the turtles in the Galapagos. Like, obviously that's huge.
That sounds fun.
That's pretty special, and I think more of that, more adventure, more like actually seeing the depths of the world and of culture and of the earth. All of that is there. And also,
I think the bigger they are, it has to relate to bigger time frames. Like time of day, it's going to be something smaller and sacred and really nourishing. Time of week, it could be something a little bit bigger that you do, like a day out, an adventure day.
Yeah.
Time of month, it could be something a little bigger.
Yeah.
Time of year, even bigger items.
Yeah, time of life. Yeah, and I think naturally the time of day would almost be the thing that is more qualitative, if that makes sense, right? If there's something like your spiritual practice or a certain way that you connect with your internal world, that's something
Things you want to learn, new skills, or
like that's something that you need to cultivate over time, and you need to carve out time daily for that. Whereas big adventures and trips like that, that's just a one-off kind of experience.
Yeah. Well, we hope this helped to some extent. We enjoy just talking through these things literally all day, every day. So we figured, why not do it and just hit record in front of a camera? And of course, this is for our own nourishment as well, because the more we remind ourselves and just revisit these things, it becomes like a North Star. It becomes like a guide in the night where it's easy to get lost and easy to sway off course, but we're just revisit these conversations and
just become a victim. I feel like it's so easy. It's so easy to just feel like, circumstance kept me from living my dreams, but it's like, no, it's a choice.
It's a choice. So you have to insert your dreams forcefully.
Very forcefully.
Because no one else will. Yeah, no one else
except your partner.
No one else can choose for you. And sometimes we have to choose for each other.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're gonna do your art today. And you're like, okay, like I need to do that.
Yeah.
And then like you're like, when's the last time you went to the gym? When's the last time you got a massage? When's the last time? And I'm like, yeah, you're right. And then like we keep each other on track with who we say we want to be and what we know is going to keep each other nourished, and like while also having that neutrality of like you're your own individual, you can live your existence as you desire, and it's not my agenda for you, it's your agenda for you that I'm simply trying to remind you of. And so anyways, love you. You're awesome. Peace out.